All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get the webinar started. My name is Orman Perez. I'm the team leader for the Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program here at the Department of Education. And in the room with me, I have members of the Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program team, and there are other members that are going to be following with us remotely. All right, so let's just start off with a really quick introduction and overview. First of all, I'd just like to start off by saying thank you for your interest in the Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program competition. We're really excited about this inaugural competition for this program, and we're really excited and thankful for you spending a chunk of your time this afternoon with us to learn more about the program and how you can apply for a grant. So first of all, just to really get started with a few housekeeping issues, the NIA, the notice inviting applications and the application package instructions were posted on December 20th of 2016. The application instructions are posted on the Office of Innovation and Improvement website, and they're also available on grants.gov. FAQs will be coming very soon. We're working on a draft of that right now, and we hope to have that in your hands very soon, which will explain in finer detail some of the finer points about the competition, about the grant itself. The TSL competition webinar. This competition webinar is actually being recorded, and once this webinar is complete, a link to the recording along with the PowerPoint slides will be posted on our program website. And finally, while we're in the midst of this webinar, please do feel free to submit any questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure that we spend some time answering all of your questions. But after this webinar concludes, I'd like you to be sure to submit any questions that you have to the tsl@ed.gov mailbox, and we're turning around questions pretty rapidly, so please do feel free to submit any questions you have there. All right. So first off, we're hoping that if you are intending to submit an application for a TSL grant this year, that you will submit your notice of intent by February 4th, 2017. And the reason for that is that it will help us to really have a very organized and orderly competition. It'll do a lot to help us to make sure that we can do that in a very organized way. We are, keep in mind that the notice of intent to apply is optional. In order to do so, just send an email to tsl@ed.gov with intent to apply in the email subject line. Be sure to include the name of the organization, state, name of the point of contact in the intent to apply. Again, it's optional, but we really do strongly encourage that you do that, as it will help us to be more efficient in the application review process. And then, of course, the final application deadline is March 24th, 2017 at 4:30 p.m. And we'll talk a little bit later about the application process and deadlines, and making sure that you start the process early and leave enough time for anything that may happen at the end. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start off with an overview of the competition. After that, we'll transition to we'll talk about the absolute priorities, requirements, and the competitive preference priorities. We're going to do have a discussion about the grant review and selection process. We'll talk about completing and submitting the application, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. And as I complete each major section, because there's a good number of slides that we have, and I want to make sure that we're not missing anyone's questions. We will attempt to answer questions after each section, but then we'll also have some time for additional follow-up questions and answers at the end. All right, so let's get started. What is TSL? The TSL, Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program, is a new U.S. Department of Education discretionary grant program. It was authorized in the fairly new ESSA law, which was signed into law in December of 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act. The TSL program really builds on TIF. For those of you that are familiar with the Teacher Incentive Fund program, it builds upon that framework. And essentially what it does is it really promotes the implementation of human capital management systems and performance-based compensation for teachers, principals, and other school leaders. TSL really aims to drive improvements in a district's human capital management system for increased student outcomes. And TSL promotes comprehensive evaluation and support systems for educators within an LEA, and that's especially true for those that are serving in high-need schools. And then finally, TSL aims to improve student outcomes by increasing educators' effectiveness. And so what I wanted to do first is, before we really dive into some of the priorities and criteria, I really wanted to just kind of touch on a few of the definitions that we'll use a lot. If you're familiar with TIF and now with TSL, there's some terms and some terminology that will be used a lot, and I want to make sure that everyone's up to speed. First of all, educator, when we use it in the context of the TSL grant, educator means a teacher, principal, or a school leader. An evaluation and support system is essentially the system that LEAs or states are using to really evaluate the performance of teachers, school leaders, and other school leaders. Essentially, it will have clear and fair measures of teacher, principal, and other school leader performance. It will have in some way, it will include student academic achievement, and then also it should have differentiated, targeted, and personalized support should be a feature of the evaluation and support system. Evidence-based is another term that we'll use a lot. Really just means that the proposed activity, strategy, or intervention is supported by strong evidence, or it's supported by moderate evidence, promising evidence, or that it demonstrates a rationale. And for the purposes of the teacher and school leader incentive program, we're looking as the standard, we're looking for, at a minimum, that it's supported by promising evidence. Human capital management system is a system that LEAs use to make and implement human capital decisions. These types of decisions can be preparation of educators, recruitment, hiring, placement, compensation, professional development, things of that nature. The human capital management system should also include a performance-based compensation system, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. High-need school. For the purposes of the TSL grant, a high-need school is defined as a school with 50% or more of its enrollment from low-income families. And of course, that's going to be based on eligibility for free or reduced price lunch subsidies. Or it can be based on another poverty measure that LEAs use that's consistent with the SEA. Performance-based compensation, we talked about a little bit in the last slide, is a system of compensation for teachers, principals, or other school leaders that differentiates levels of compensation, essentially based on that educator's performance. And then school leader, finally, is a principal, assistant principal, or other individual who is either an employee or officer of an elementary school or secondary school, LEA, or other entity operating an elementary school or secondary school, and B, is responsible for the daily instructional leadership and managerial operations in the elementary school or secondary school building. Right. So one thing I wanted to highlight sort of early on is that TIF, as I mentioned earlier, TIF does really, TSL does build upon the previous TIF grant program. However, there are many significant and also subtle differences. And so when I say that, the reason why I'm saying that is that I really strongly encourage applicants to read through all of the material that you have on TSL. Be sure to read through the entire application package instructions, read through the notice inviting applications, and then once the frequently asked questions are available, which we hope will be in at least a few weeks, we ask that you please read through that to make sure that you are up to speed on all the nuances and differences between TSL and TIF. And here's some of the examples that you may have already discovered are this time TSL has a 50% matching requirement. We're going to talk a little bit about that in more detail, but that's something that people have really been emailing me about to ask some guidance on. So we're going to provide you with some information about that later, and then there'll be more information about that later in the FAQs. For TSL, at least a majority of schools participating in the TSL-funded performance-based compensation system must be high-need schools. And for those of you that have applied for TIF grants in the past, that may seem as a departure because in the past we required that all of the schools be high-need schools. Also, new priorities, we have new priorities, absolute priorities, there are new programmatic requirements, there are statutory requirements as well that we'll get into as well. Okay, and there's also an emphasis with ESSA, the new ESSA law. There's a great emphasis on evidence-based practices, so that finds its way into TSL. Finally, the last two, there's an increased focus on projects that emphasize efforts to create a diverse educator force. And then also we're looking for, the TSL program, I should say, is looking for an alignment between TSL-funded activities and activities identified in the state's equitable access plans. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the TSL award itself. So we're actually expecting about somewhere in the $110 million range of available funds. We expect that we're going to probably be making about 15 to 20 awards. The estimated range, TIF is a little bit tricky because the projects can vary in scope and size. So we would expect that projects will probably be funded at a level of as little as maybe $500,000 for the first year, up to as much as $12 million in the first year. It really depends on the district, the activities, the scope, the project itself. The project period is also a little bit different. These projects will be awarded with a 36-month for 36 months. But with that said, there's the option to renew for up to 2 years additionally, as long as the department can determine that the funds are being used effectively. So essentially, we're asking applicants to budget for 5 years in their application. Your application budget should reflect a 5-year period for the grant. And it's important to note that funding beyond the first year of the grant will be obviously subject to available funding and approval of continuation awards. All right, so let's talk about who's eligible to apply for a grant. So essentially, eligibility falls into about 4 buckets. The first category for eligibility is LEAs, including charter schools that are LEAs or a consortium of LEAs. The second bucket is for state education agencies or state agencies designated by the chief executive of a state to participate in this grant program. The third category would be the Bureau of Indian Education, And then finally, the fourth category would be a partnership consisting of either one or more agencies described in A, B, or C, or a nonprofit, or actually a for-profit entity that's linked with the one of the three categories in A, B, and C. Okay. There's an important note at the bottom there of that slide there to ensure that in order to ensure that you're eligible for to apply for the grant, you must be sure that you meet any absolute priorities and the application requirements that are set forth in the notice. Right. So I wanted to, before we really dig in, there are a couple of questions that came up pretty frequently since the notice was published on December 20th, and I wanted to highlight a few of them here. These are things that will appear in greater detail in the frequently asked questions document that'll be coming later. But I wanted to make sure that if any of you haven't had this question answered by myself or a member of the TSL team yet, and they're on your mind, that you get answers to them up front. So the first one is, can you clarify the section in the statute /NIA on limitations for how many times an applicant can receive an award? And the reason I put that in there was because there's actually a discrepancy between what is in the statute and what's actually in the notice inviting applications. And thank you to, I think there were 2 or 3 of you that are probably on the call right now that pointed that out to us. So long story short, as you can see the answer there, an LEA may only receive a TSL grant award twice. The statute is very clear on that. The statute speaks to local education agencies. However, the way it was written into the NIA, it says applicants. So you want to make sure that you're very clear that an LEA may only receive a TSL grant award twice. However, that limitation doesn't apply to the other eligible entities. So the Bureau of Indian Education would be able to apply more than once. A state education agency would be able to apply, more than twice. An SEA would be able to apply more than twice also. So I just want to make sure that that was clear and articulated up front for you. The second question is, would a nonprofit-based institution of higher education be eligible to apply under the partnership part of the eligible entity definition? This is one I got a few times also. Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. Our definition of nonprofit comes directly from the uniform guidance, and the uniform guidance, that section does specifically exclude institutions of higher education from the definition of nonprofits. Okay. And finally, another question I received several times is, would a state university be eligible to apply? And the answer to that is actually yes. A state university would be considered an other state agency. There's just a couple of things that you would need to provide in your application. For one, you would need to be able to provide documentation that you are legally, that the institution is legally considered a state agency from that state's government. And the second thing that institution would need is a letter affirming or some sort of assurance affirming that the governor has approved the institution's participation in the TSL competition. All right. So that's it for our overview. What I'm going to do now is we're going to just really briefly review the questions to see if there's anything that we need to go over. So the first question we have is from Dana, and Dana asked, she says, this is funded under the continuing resolution that will expire in April. How can prospective grantees know they will be funded under the CR, after the CR expires? Since a whole new budget is likely under a new administration? That's a great question, and that's something that I've also gotten a few times. And so the answer that I've been giving is that this, we requested a more than sufficient amount of funding for the new budget to be approved to support the grant in FY17. We're moving forward as if we expect that budget to be approved. In the event that the funding is not approved, we will still, we'll still run the competition and we'll still award grants at a later time when there is funding for the program. But the expectation now is that we're moving forward as though this funding will be approved. Okay. And so there's another question asking if school-wide performance-based compensation approaches are allowable, and yes, absolutely they are. One thing I will say is that the department does not prescribe how you will specifically answer the absolute priorities or the competitive preference priorities. So absolutely, there are things that are required in there, but in terms of the strategies that you use, those are going to be up to you. Okay, I have one from Abby, which says, regarding PBCS, having read the application guide and listening here, I remain unclear whether pay must be tied in part to student outcomes attributable to individual educators, or maybe based on the impact/role that an individual educator has on student outcomes. Level or scope of responsibilities as for teacher leader. Can I please clarify? If I'm understanding your question right, you're asking if there's, it looks like you're asking if the pay for performance needs to be based in part on student achievement for an individual teacher, or based on student performance for school-wide. And I think that's how I got it. And so the expectation is that pay for performance, particularly for teachers, would be based in large part on their individual performance. But there's nothing in the statute that specifically says that it can't also be based, or there can't be a portion of it that's based on school-wide factors, based on their actual impact, not just in their individual classrooms, but their contribution to the school as a whole. And so I hope I answered that question right, but if I didn't, I would definitely encourage you to either add another question here, a follow-up question, or you can send a question to me via tsl@ed.gov. Okay, and can an SCA apply for a grant and conduct an RFP process to select high-need schools, school districts to participate in the TSL program? And yeah, I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't be able to do that. I can double check on that, but I believe the answer to that would be yes. And does an institution of higher education qualify as a nonprofit organization? I think we answered that one already. The answer is no. And are educational service agencies eligible applicants? And the answer to that is yes. Can a CMO apply for a data tracking system alone without also applying for a performance-based compensation system? And so the performance-based compensation system is a required part of the application, and so both of those components would need to be included in the application. All right, looks like we're getting to the bottom of these questions here. Is a regional state organization also considered an other state agency? And the answer for that would be yes as well. All right, let's see. And would teacher residency programs qualify? And sure, teacher residency programs are certainly strategies that could be included as a part of the human capital management system, as a sort of a teacher pipeline for recruitment purposes. And so yeah, there's definitely, that would definitely be supported under this grant. And finally, just to clarify, does an SEA have to name specific committed LEAs in the proposal, or could they be identified after the grant is awarded? So there would need to be a commitment of LEAs that are part of the actual application itself. And I'm not sure if that is related to the other question that asked about the RFP, but that whole RFP process would have to take place prior to the application actually being submitted. Okay. All right, so that's all the questions that we have as of right now. I'm going to move on to program priorities and requirements. Okay, and as you have questions, please do feel free to continue sending them via the chat box, and we'll make sure that we keep track of where we are and we continue to answer them as they come in. All right. So just to give you a really brief overview of the FY 2017 competition, there's several key elements. This time around we have 4 absolute priorities. There are 2 competitive preference priorities, 3 programmatic requirements, and then there are additional statutory application requirements. It's important to note that a lot of the statutory application requirements are also addressed in the absolute priorities and the competitive preference priorities and the programmatic requirements, but we list them separately just so that you can see how they're written in statute. And as an important note, applicants must meet absolute priority 1, and then they also have to meet one of the following absolute priorities, either 2, 3, or 4. They don't have to meet all 4 priorities. You just have to meet absolute priority 1 and absolute priority 2, and you'll see why in a moment. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the first absolute priority. First absolute priority, if you've applied for a TIF grant in the past, this will seem very similar and very familiar. The first absolute priority is that there be a human capital management system. One of the really important pieces that we want to make sure that you're aware of here is that there is an expectation that applicants already have a functioning human capital management system in place. And so in order to meet this absolute priority, you're going to have to provide a description of the existing LEA-wide human capital management system. Okay, and also we want to have a description of the performance-based compensation system as well. And so within that description, there are a few things that we want to make sure that we see. First, we want to find out how the human capital management system currently includes an evaluation support system that addresses teachers, school leaders, or both. It needs to also reflect clear and fair measures of performance, and we want to see how that is. It also needs to be based in part on demonstrated improvement in student academic achievement. Okay, so those are all important components of the human capital management system and the evaluation and support system. We also want to see that that you're describing any proposed modifications to the human capital management system that are going to be included in your proposed project. Okay? And then finally, we want to see how the evaluation and support system will be designed in such a way to provide ongoing, differentiated, targeted, and personalized support and feedback for improvement, including professional development opportunities designed to increase effectiveness during the entire project period. And that's an important piece, because we want to make sure that we're moving towards evaluation and support systems that are really targeting strengths and targeting areas of improvement for educators, and that the feedback and the professional development that they're receiving as a result is personalized and tailored to them. Right, and then finally, for the human capital management system, a couple other points I want to point out. In addition, you're going to need to be able to describe the data system that you're using to link educators with student academic achievement. And then also you need to be able to describe how the human capital management system uses performance information from the evaluation support system to inform key school and district level human capital decisions. And this is particularly critical as it affects educators who are working in high need schools. Okay. All right, now absolute priorities 2, 3, and 4 are really very similar, and you've probably already seen this if you've been reading through the application instructions and the notice of inviting applications. They all focus on the evaluation and support systems, and they all focus on enhancements to the evaluation and support system. So absolute priority 2 focuses on enhancements that would be made to the evaluation and support system for teachers in high-need schools within the LEA, or the LEAs that the project will serve. And that's a really important point, because this one is focused on teachers. Absolute priority 3, however, is focused on school leaders. So again, we want to see a description of how you would enhance the evaluation and support system, specifically as it addresses school leaders in high-need schools. And then finally, absolute priority 4 is going to address enhancements to the evaluation and support system that would address school leaders and teachers in high-need schools. So absolute priority 2 focuses strictly on teachers. Absolute priority 3 focuses on school leaders, and absolute priority 4 focuses on teachers and school leaders. Keep in mind again that you have to address absolute priority 1 and either 2, 3, or 4, but not all of the above. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the programmatic requirements here. Okay, and so first, the first requirement is that the applicant must demonstrate how the funds that are awarded will be used to perform the following types of activities. And so these are the types of activities that the program really needs to be focused on. Developing or improving an evaluation and support system, conducting outreach within an LEA or a state to gain input on how to construct an evaluation and support system and to generate support for building one, supporting school leaders, implementing a differentiated salary structure, improving the LEA's system and process for recruiting, selecting, placing, and retaining effective educators, and then also for instituting career advancement opportunities. So there's quite a bit of room to work with there. Requirement 2 refers to matching. Okay, and so this is one of those areas where we've gotten lots and lots of questions, and we've gotten lots of questions about what flexibility there is, and unfortunately, this is one of those areas where there really isn't a lot of flexibility. It was written directly into the statute, very much in the way that you see it. And so there isn't a lot of ability to to deviate from what was written, and so what this requirement states is that each applicant must provide a signed assurance attesting to its intent and ability, essentially, to meet the requirement in Section 2212F of ESEA. And so there's some things that you have to be able to do there. For one, you have to be able to provide an amount that's equal to 50% of the amount of the grant. And so I've gotten plenty of questions asking if there's some flexibility for that to be 50% of a subsection of the grant, or personnel costs, or non-personnel costs. It is actually 50% of the grant. So if you're applying for a $10 million grant, then there would need to be an amount of $5 million or greater that that would be provided by the LEA. That would be matched by the LEA, essentially. That funding would have to, or those resources would have to be from non-federal sources. The match may be provided in cash, or it may be in kind. And applicants and grantees will have to budget their matching contributions on an annual basis relative. So you can't just say that I'm applying for $10 million. We're going to provide $5 million. It would actually have to be budgeted into each year of their budget, essentially. Okay, but I want you to pay attention to that third bullet. The match may be provided in cash or in kind. One of the biggest comments or greatest comments that I've gotten from folks is that 50% is a pretty significant amount of funding to provide. I want everyone to think really creatively and innovatively about how some of those some of the activities that you're doing can be leveraged and referenced as resources and as in-kind resources. It really does specifically say cash or in-kind, and so I really want you to pay attention to that in-kind part of it, because we're not saying that you have to have that in cash, but I really want everyone and I should say I really strongly encourage everyone to really think about all of the different resources that are going to be leveraged as a part of this, and what resources that you're not thinking of that could be leveraged as in-kind resources towards the implementation of a project should you be awarded funding. So I'll leave it at that, but I really just want to encourage everyone to think really creatively about what they can do in that respect. All right, and so the third programmatic requirement is documentation of high-need schools. And so as we already went over the definition of a high-need school, it's a school whereby 50% of the students are classified as low income per free and reduced poverty data. But you're going to have to document that as well. And so applicants must demonstrate that at least the majority of participating schools are high need. It's a little bit different from previous TIF grants, where every school that participated in the performance-based compensation system had to be high need. Here we're saying at least the majority of participating schools must be high need. And so applicants will be required to provide a couple of things to help us document that. First, we're going to need a list of schools in which the proposed TSL-supported PBS would be implemented. Okay? And then you're going to also need to be able to identify which of those schools are high-need schools. For each school that's actually listed as a high-need school, you'll want to provide us with the most current free and reduced priced lunch data, or any other data that you're using that's compliant with Section 1113.5 of ESEA, and that data would determine whether or not students are from low-income families. And then finally, we need you to be able to provide us, if you have schools that are participating in the TSL-supported PBCS, but are not high-need schools, then you'll want to provide us with a rationale for extending the TSL-funded PBCS to those schools. Let us know why you felt that it was necessary to extend the performance-based compensation system to those high-need schools, or to those non-high-need schools. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take just a few minutes. A lot of these things we've talked about already, so I won't spend an inordinate amount of time on them. But I do want to just sort of touch on the statutory application requirements really quickly so you can see where some of the priorities and requirements, programmatic requirements come from. So first, a description of the performance-based compensation or the human capital management system. That's already addressed in the absolute priorities. A description of the most significant gaps or insufficiencies in student access. It's addressed in the competitive preference priority, but it's also something that'll have to be fleshed out in every application, whether you decide to apply for the competitive preference priority or not. A description and evidence of the support and commitment from teachers, principals, or other school leaders is another statutory application requirement. So you want to make sure that you address those in the document that you submit. A description of how the eligible applicant will develop and implement a fair, rigorous, valid, reliable, and objective process to evaluate a teacher, principal, or other school leader performance as applicable to the proposed project. This is something that will likely be addressed in Absolute Priority 1 and your descriptions thereof. A description of the LEAs or schools to be served under the grant, including student academic achievement, demographic, and socioeconomic information. A description of the effectiveness of teachers, principals, or other school leaders in the LEA or LEAs and the schools to be served under the grant, and goals related to increasing their effectiveness. And just a few more, description of how you will use grant funds in each year of the grant, including a timeline for implementation of key grant activities. Description of how the activities assisted under the grant will be continued after the grant period ends. And then a description of the state, local, or other public or private funds that will be used to supplement the grant, including funds under Title II, Part A of the ESEA, and also to sustain the activities assisted under the grant after the end of the grant period. And the final one is a description of the rationale for the project, how the proposed project activities are evidence-based, and also, if it's applicable, the prior experiences of the eligible entity in developing and implementing such activities. All right, so I'm going to talk really briefly about the competitive preference priorities. There are two competitive preference priorities in this grant competition, and they are worth up to a total of 15 points. The first focuses in on the human capital management system and use of the HCMS to improve equitable access to effective educators. And this is one of those areas where it really dovetails well with a lot of the work that your states are probably already doing in implementing their equitable access plans that states had to develop 2 years ago. And so this is one of those areas where prior to being at ED, just a little bit of self-disclosure, I was actually at a state education agency and contributed quite a bit to the development of our state's equitable access plan. One of the things that we complained about a lot was not having the funding to be able to do that. So the TSL grant is actually a really great tool to be able to find some alignment and to do some work to really link with what states are doing in that respect. So at a minimum, in order to receive these competitive preference priority points, applicants will be required to identify the most significant gaps or insufficiencies in student access to effective teachers, school leaders, or both in high-need schools. They'll also be required to identify relevant factors used in determining those gaps. Okay, and those factors can be things such as data on availability of school resources, staffing patterns, any school climate data that you may have or that you may be gathering, and also educator support. And then finally, applicants will need to describe how the strategies proposed for closing the identified gaps are actually aligned to and are consistent with the strategies that are identified in your state's plan to ensure equitable access to effective or excellent educators. Okay. And then the second competitive preference priority really focuses on attracting, supporting, and retaining a diverse and effective workforce. And so at a minimum, we want you to be able to provide a description that details your commitment to creating such a space, and then also your plan for attracting, supporting, and retaining diverse educators. And so again, it's important to note that no applicant is required to apply for the competitive preference priorities, but the 15 points is a pretty significant a chunk of additional points to be able to support the application. So we would strongly encourage applications to consider what they can do in these two respects. And so we've reviewed the questions, and so we'll just go through one by one. And so we have the first one we'll answer is, does the definition of school include those that have early childhood programs, birth to age 5 or preschool, and where the proposed project would work with early childhood teachers, staff in those schools? I'm going to be really honest. I don't know the answer to that question. I believe the answer is no, but we're going to follow up on that for you, and if you can send that question specifically to tsl@ed.gov, we'll be sure to follow up with you there, and also we'll make sure that we include that in the FAQs as well, so everyone can have access to the answer. Let's see. So the next one is, can current TIF-4 awardees use the same partners in their applications to TSL? The answer is yes. Okay, And we have another question from Erica. Am I correct that LEAs who have received 2 TIF as opposed to TSL grants are eligible to apply? The answer to that is yes as well. TSL is a new grant program, and it is a separate program from TIF. It builds on TIF, but it's a separate program from TIF. So yes, former TIF grantees would be eligible to apply. Okay, and so I have a question here that says many districts have an HCMS but want to add a PBCS through this TFL grant. Is that allowable? Yes, we do require that there be an existing human capital management system. We probably want to talk a little bit more about what you mean by add a PBCS. There should be a performance-based compensation system already in place for this grant, and it's possible that the grantee has a performance-based compensation system in place without knowing it's a performance-based compensation system. So we may want to have they may just not call it a performance-based compensation system, but we would assume at this stage that if someone has an HCMS, they probably have a PBCS as well. But that's something that you could send through tsl@ed.gov, and we can help you to figure out in more detail. Let's see. Okay, does ED envision an equitable distribution of grant awards among absolute priorities 2, 3, and 4? I don't know that it's a really good question. I don't know that we've really thought through the distribution of grants along those priorities. I don't believe the answer to that is yes. So we're going to score applications based on, we're going to select applicants or select awards, stumbling over my words here. We're going to select awards based on the highest scoring applications, so I don't believe that there is any intention that we will be distributing them along those 3 caveats, 2, 3, and 4 absolute priorities. Okay. Does an LEA need to have, and actually, sorry, on that last question, we will definitely follow up on that to get a definitive answer, but I think as of right now, I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no. Okay, does an LEA need to have a human capital management system and PBCS already operating prior to the grant? The answer to that is yes. Can you give some examples of creative in-kind contributions? I would love to. I don't know that I want to right now on the webinar. What I will say is that we are going to be coming out with some more guidance in the FAQs that'll be released shortly, and there is a plan there to have some examples of the types of things that that would be acceptable for in-kind. And I think there was a question there about how do we avoid the supplant issue, and so the supplant issue for TSL is again a little different than it was with TIF. With TSL, there is a requirement that you use TSL funds to supplement and not supplant federal or state funds, activities that are funded by state or federal funds. However, that requirement does not exist for use of local funds for activities. So there is some flexibility there that's within the law. I'm not sure necessarily if that was intended or not, but that flexibility does exist. I hope that answers the question. Okay. And can you give some more examples of creative in-kind contributions? I will say that we will be providing examples of creative in-kind contributions. I don't want to get ahead of myself and call them creative, but they will definitely be examples of in-kind contribution examples for that requirement. And we'll provide that in the FAQs that'll be released shortly. Okay. We have another question here. Am I correct that LEAs who have received 2 TIF as opposed to TSL grants are eligible. And so yes, we did answer that one before. Yes, this is a separate grant program. Any former TIF grantee would be eligible to apply again. Okay. All right, we've got a question from Bill. If a nonprofit and school district are partnering with the nonprofit as the applicant/fiscal agent, how is the geography of the applicant determined by ED? That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. So, Bill, we're taking notes on any of the questions that I'm not able to answer right now, and we will follow up directly with you on that. And let's see. Can applicants apply and request for funding to support a project that's already being implemented, or must a new project be proposed? And so, yes, the expectation is that the funding will be to support an existing project. But there's also an expectation that there is some mention of or description of how the existing human capital management system, performance-based compensation system, evaluation and support system, any of those systems are going to be modified in some way. A question here that says, could you comment on record-keeping requirements for in-kind contributions to the match? In particular, what would be required of districts to support document time /document time spent by educators on grant-related activities? So I probably could spend a lot of time talking about that. What I would encourage you to do is send a note to send that question to tsl@ed.gov, and I will respond back to you directly on that. And also just keep in mind that we're going to provide, obviously, the in-kind and the 50% matches is a big point of concern for everyone, so we're going to make sure that we have plenty of information in the FAQ that really gets to a lot of your questions. Okay, will TSL have a program evaluation component, same as or similar to TIF before? Absolutely, it will. There is a requirement that grantees or that applicants actually in their application describe their plan to evaluate the program. Okay. And here's another one. Are we able to put funds towards initiatives we are already working on, or do they need to be applied to new initiatives we aren't currently doing? So I think I answered that question already. You can certainly put them towards new initiatives, but you also need to have a working human capital management system and performance-based compensation system in place. And before we end, can you tell us where the FAQs will be posted? No problem on missing the beginning. The FAQs will be posted on the program website at innovation.ed.gov, and I can provide you with the full path to that website if you actually just send that question to tsl@ed.gov, and I'll actually send you the link to it. You'll probably see that link 3 or 4 more times before we get to the end of the slides. All right, from Liesel Groberg, so let's see, if the PBS is not already up and running, you can be eligible. I'm not sure. Can you be eligible? Sorry. Can you be eligible as long as you build one with the grant? Unfortunately, the human capital management system does need to be existing and running. Really the expectation is that as soon as a grantee receives the funds, they're able to get up and running immediately with the grant. So there isn't the expectation anymore that there would be a year or an 18-month or a 2-year, design and development phase of the system. There really would be the expectation that it's already working, it's functioning. If anything, there are modifications to be made to the system, perhaps in response to data that has been gathered or analyzed or what have you. But the expectation is that that system would already be in place. All right, let's see if we have any more. So we have, if a project has not been funded by TIF, does that mean it is not eligible for TSL funding? Absolutely not. If a project has not been funded by TIF, you are still welcome to apply, and you would be just as eligible as someone who has received TIF funding in the past. And just a couple more. Can the student achievement component of the PBCS be based on student growth? Certainly, it can be based on student growth, or it can be based on other student achievement factors that have been identified by the LEA or LEAs that are part of the program as valuable toward the human capital management system and performance-based compensation system. Okay. And then, all right, so that looks like that's it. Okay. So let us move on. And I realize we're getting a little short on time, so I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly through the rest of this presentation so that we have a little bit of extra time for questions at the end. But just make sure that you are adding your questions into the side panel chat box, and as we move forward, we'll still continue to try to answer as many questions as possible. All right. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about the review and selection process. And again, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly through this part of the process of the presentation. The department, so there's a few things that we will do as a part of the review and selection process, and then there are other parts that will be completed by others. So here's what the department's going to do. We will screen the applications against the absolute priorities. We'll make sure that they meet programmatic requirements, and we'll also make sure that they meet application requirements identified as well. We will determine which applications, based on that screening process, are eligible to be read by reviewers, and whether they've met eligibility and other requirements established by the statute and the NIA. We'll also use independent reviewers from various relevant backgrounds, and they're going to be involved in reading and scoring the applications. And then based on their scores, we will conduct a cost analysis budget review for successful applicants, and then finally, obviously, we will make selections. That probably should have been a fifth bullet. All right. And so let's just talk really, really quickly about these selection criteria. And so the maximum score for all of the TIF competition selection criteria is 100 points. There's 5 selection criteria that we're going to talk about in a moment. The points or weights assigned to each criterion are indicated in parentheses, okay? But I'll highlight those for you. And then of course, we will use non-federal peer reviewers to read and review each application against these selection criteria. So this gives you a good sense of what they will actually be looking for when they review your applications. Okay, so the first criterion is evidence of support. And so obviously we want to make sure that this application is supported, and that there's a couple of things that we're looking for. First, we want to really see that your proposed project is part of a comprehensive effort to improve teaching and learning. So we want to see that it's actually integrated with other activities, and that it's part of a comprehensive project to achieve that goal. We also want to make sure and that we understand the extent to which, the services to be provided really do involve a collaboration of appropriate partners. And so that's a very important aspect of it also. And then, of course, we want to make sure that it integrates with or it builds on similar or related efforts to improve relevant outcomes. So again, when we talked about, the equitable access plans, I know a lot of you, particularly at the state level, are starting to look at your ESSA funds, particularly related to some of the title programs like Title I, Title II, and Title III. I mean, these are all ways to start looking at, how some of the different funding sources come together, and also some of the programs and activities and efforts that other offices and other agencies are working on. Okay. The second criterion is need for the project, and so a total of 25 points are available under this criterion, and so in determining the need for the project, this is really the area where you're able to demonstrate that a comprehensive needs assessment has really been done, and to really express that this is a project that is going to meet the needs of your audience essentially. So a couple of things that we're going to want to see are the extent to which the proposed project will provide services that otherwise address the needs of students at risk of educational failure, which is really important to this grant program. We also want to see the extent to which specific gaps or weaknesses in services, infrastructure, or opportunities have been identified and will be addressed by the project. So again, this is the area where you really want to provide us with a needs assessment that shows why essentially your program really needs these funds and how they will help you to solve critical shortages or critical gaps or weaknesses. The third criterion is the quality of the project design, which is worth 20 points. And here, we're really asking you to show us, or rather the reviewers are really going to be looking for evidence that the project is designed in a way that is of high quality. We want to see the extent to which the proposed project demonstrates a rationale. It should be built around a rationale. And as we mentioned earlier, the standard for that rationale, or for that evidence, I should say, is promising evidence. We want to see the extent to which the design of the proposed project will successfully address the needs of the target population. And then finally, the extent to which the grant activities will be evaluated, monitored, and reported to the public. So again, all these three elements are going to provide evidence of the quality of the design of the project. And so the peer reviewers will certainly be looking at the quality of the project design very intently. And then obviously the quality of the management plan is important as well. This criterion is worth 20 points as well. And so here we're really looking to see that the project is designed in such a way that there are resources, personnel, and fiscal in place so that the project can achieve the objectives of the proposed, it can achieve its proposed objectives on time and within budget, and those are critically important. And then that would include clearly defined responsibilities, timelines, milestones, etc., for accomplishing the project tasks. And then finally, adequacy of resources is the final selection criterion. And so this is worth 5 points. And here we're going to want to see the potential for continued support of the project after the federal funding ends. Okay, and then obviously we also want to see the potential for the incorporation of project purposes, activities, or benefits into the ongoing program after funding has ended. Okay. And so since we're short on time, I'm going to go ahead, and that was a short section, I'm going to go ahead and skip past and go into completing and submitting the application package. And then once that section is over, I'll pick back up and we'll answer the final questions. Okay. All right. So applicants, and so this is the really important part, applicants for the TIF competition must apply under CFDA number 84.374A. Okay, so this time around, and for the TIF 5 grant prior, if you were familiar with that grant application, all applications will be submitted electronically for FY 2017. Okay, so I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already downloaded the application package, please definitely do that and look through. Just about everything that I'm saying today is detailed, or is provided in much greater detail in the application instructions. But I do want to point out that the application format, okay, is described in the application checklist, which is located on page 49 of the application package. Okay, it's got 8 specific parts, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in just a minute. And again, detailed instructions for all of these sections are included in the application package. So part one deals with the Ed Standard Fund forms, and this is where you're going to upload all of the forms that are just standard for any Department of Education discretionary grant program. These would be the application for federal assistance, SF 424, the Department of Education Supplemental Information form, which is SF 424, the Department of Education Budget Summary Form, Ed 524, Sections A and B, and the Disclosure of Lobbying Activities, which is SF LLL. And some of you are probably very familiar with these forms, and for those of you that are not, or for those of you that are but want a refresher, instructions can be viewed and printed at the link below. Okay. Part two of the application is deals with the assurances and certifications, and here are three specific forms that need to be provided. There's the General Education Provisions Act, the GEPA requirements, Section 427. There's the assurances for non-construction programs, SF 424B, grants.gov, lobby form, formerly Ed 80-0013 form. And then part three gets into the application narratives. And this is really where the meat of your application is going to be. The first form is the abstract narrative form. Here we're really looking for a one-pager. It needs to be limited to 2,000 characters, and it should include the following items. It should tell us the name and eligibility classification of each applicant. It should also provide a list of the names of all participating LEAs, states, nonprofit organizations that are included in the application. It should indicate if the application is from a single eligible applicant or a partnership. In that, we should also know the total number of schools that are participating, the total number of schools that are to be served by the TSL-funded PBCS, and also there should be an indication of how many of those schools are high needs. The abstract should also include a summary statement of the project objectives and activities, and it should also include an indication of any competitive preference priorities for which the applicant is applying, so we can flag those early on. Right, so the abstract narrative form is followed by the application narrative / project narrative form, and so the project narrative really is there to describe the project that the applicant or that you are planning to carry out. And it should also include any other required elements that we've identified through this presentation and in the NIA and application instructions. The project narrative should include a table of contents. That table of contents should not exceed one double-spaced page. We encourage applicants, it's not a requirement, but we do really encourage applicants to limit this section of the application to no more than 40 pages. Applicants should respond to the absolute priorities, selection criteria, and requirements that are found in the application package. The application may be able to address, the applicant may be able to address a priority or requirement fully within the context of its selection criteria discussion. In other cases, you might have things in different places. Okay, so you may start talking about absolute priority 1 in one part of the application, but then you may pick up on it a few pages later. It really just depends on how you're designing your application and your project narrative. And then the application should contain clear headings to help the department staff and peer reviewers match the narrative with the selection criteria. That's really important because at the end of the day, the peer reviewers are probably going to be reviewing anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe 7 applications. And they don't have a tremendous amount of time to do it, so the more the more you can do to streamline the application on your part, the better read it's going to be for the peer reviewers. All right. And so part 3, application narrative, budget narrative form. In a single document, you're going to attach the budget narrative form. Each application must provide the following 2 budget narratives. It should be the TSL grant funds budget narrative, okay, and the non-TSL resources, which is where you will put all of your non-TSL resources, obviously, and in-kind contributions. Right, and continuing with the budget narrative, both budget narratives should be consistent with the Ed 524 form, and they should provide sufficient detail to give an itemized budget breakdown. It should reflect the 60-month expected project period. It should also show the basis for estimating costs of things like personnel salaries, benefits, project staff, travel, materials and supplies, etc. It should show the relationship between the requested funds and project activities and outcomes. And it should also show the total the total amount that will be expended. Okay. And at the end of the day, reviewers and project staff should be able to have a good sense of how the requested funds will be used. All right. And I apologize for going a little bit fast now. I do realize that we're running out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Part 3, again, budget narrative. For the non-TSL resources, again, I just want to really reiterate that TSL requires a 50% match of funds. Remember, we're going to be creative with those in-kind resources and contributions. During the application review process, reviewers will consider the significance of an applicant's proposed contribution of non-TIF funds or in-kind resources when evaluating an applicant's sustainability plan. And then also I want to just highlight that each grantee must comply with the content of its approved application and is responsible for fulfilling the commitment of non-TIF funds or in-kind resources set forth in Section B of Ed 524. All right, so part 4, high need documentation. We went over this a little bit earlier. Applicants are going to provide a list of all schools in which the proposed TSL-supported PBCS will be implemented. The list will indicate which schools are high need. For each high need school listed, applicants are going to need to provide the most recent free and reduced priced lunch data or another form of data that demonstrates that students are from low-income families. And then finally, applicants must provide a rationale for extending the TSL-funded PBCS to any educators that are not working in high-need schools. All right, parts 5 and 6. Part 5 is charter school documentation, if applicable. Applicants will need to provide documentation that charter school LEAs are actually considered by the state as LEAs. And then commitment. Applicants should provide copies of letters, surveys, or other evidence to support, to demonstrate that they are supported in their participation in this project. Part 7 is the indirect cost rate agreement. All applicants should attach a copy of their current indirect cost rate agreement. If you don't yet have an indirect cost rate agreement, which you very well may not, you're not actually required to submit any documentation regarding that. What you would use in that case, if you don't already have an indirect cost rate agreement, is the temporary rate of 10%. Once an award is made, however, an applicant will really need to move rapidly to obtain an indirect cost rate agreement. And so if you have any questions about indirect cost rates or indirect cost rate agreements, there's a lot of information on that, in particular on page 41 of the application packet. So there's plenty of information and resources for you there. And then finally, Part 8 is individual resumes for project directors and key personnel. All applicants should provide brief resumes or job descriptions for project directors and other key personnel. And this is documentation that should really describe their qualifications. And it should be the qualifications for any of the key people that will be carrying out responsibilities for, under the project. And then, of course, there's the other attachments form. And so there are other things that you can append to the application, such as the optional application requirements checklist, the optional high-need school checklist, logic model, if applicable, resumes of key personnel, other documents, etc. That's where you would put all of those types of things in the other attachment form. All right, and so let's just, once again, let's review the submission deadline. Applications must be submitted no later than 4:30 p.m. I even have the seconds there as 4:30:00. Please be sure that those applications are submitted before 4:30:00. If it's 4:30:01, the application is actually late. So it has to be on time. Your application needs to be fully uploaded and submitted with a date and time stamp, again, of 4:30:00. Late applications will not be accepted, so please be sure to get those to us ahead of time and leave plenty of time. Important things to remember. Start the registration process early. Critically important that you do that. If you will have to register with grants.gov if you are not already, and you must have an active system for award management registration and a DUNS number. These things can take some time. They can take days or weeks. So you want to make sure that you have that you leave plenty of time to get all of the registrations that you need and that you're set up. You don't want to wait too long, because if you're waiting for these things at the end, these are the things that could cause you to submit an application after 4:30:00. So you want to make sure that that's not the case. Also, keep in mind that you can download and work on the application while your registration is being completed. You just can't submit the application until all those pieces are in place. But you can go ahead and download the application packet and all the forms, and you can make sure that you're completing them in the process. Okay. All right, authorized organization representative. Keep in mind you will need to have an AOR. This is the person who will sign and submit the application through grants.gov on behalf of your organization. The AOR is going to need to create a username and password that will serve as the electronic signature. The AOR should be the certifying individual who is ultimately responsible for the grant if awarded. And then the electronic business point of contact must approve the AOR in grants.gov in order to submit a grant application. And then finally, I guess excitedly, you're going to apply. And through the applicant tab, in order to do that, you want to search for the CFDA number when you're in grants.gov to locate the application package. Again, that CFDA number is 374A. You want to be sure that you have the latest version of Adobe Reader, which is important. Download the application package on your computer so that you can work offline. You don't need to be registered in grants.gov to download the application package to work offline, but you do need to be registered in order to submit it. Log into grants.gov and submit the application package, okay? And keep in mind that must be in PDF format. Everything must be in PDF format. All right, like I just said that. All documents must be in PDF format. I'll repeat myself. You will not receive an error message if you attach the document that's not PDF. It's important to know. You can upload Word documents, you can upload Excel files, and grants.gov will accept them. It's set up to accept them. However, on our end, we will not be able to view any documents that are uploaded that way. So you want to make sure that everything that you submit is a PDF. Again, we won't be able to view it if it's not a PDF. If you have files that are password protected PDFs, we won't be able to view those either. And if you have a file within a file, we won't be able to view that either. So please make sure they are all standard PDF documents. GrantStat, and so I'll skip that part. We already talked about that. All right. And so I think I kind of alluded to this early. Submit your application early. We strongly recommend that you don't wait until the last day to submit your application. It's important to note that the time it takes to upload your application will vary depending on the size of your application, the speed of your connection. It can take as little as a few minutes to upwards of several hours to complete your grant submission. I don't know why that is. I just know that it is. So I would really, again, just really encourage you to not wait until the last moment to submit your application. If grants.gov rejects your application, you're going to really want to make sure that you have enough time to address the error and resubmit successfully prior to the deadline. So I would just say to save yourselves a tremendous amount of headaches and just really plan to not wait until the last possible day. All right, and so tracking your application, once submitted, you're going to receive an email that indicates that your application has been received by grants.gov. You'll get either a validation or rejection email. And so what you'll want to do is you'll be verifying the successful submission, or it'll be a rejection that's due to errors with the description of the issue. You must have a validation email from grants.gov to confirm that your application has been successfully submitted, and then you'll be notified when Ed has retrieved your application from grants.gov. And I promise there's just a couple of slides left. If you have any problems using grants.gov, any questions or concerns that you have can be directed to the grants.gov support team, and I've included their contact information below. And you must obtain a grants.gov help desk case number and keep track of your progress to resolve any issues you're having. And I would just say that you can imagine there will likely be I think there's a lot of people. I'm seeing there's quite a few people on the call here. That would indicate to me that there's a lot of interest in this grant. You can imagine how the grants.gov team will be slammed on the last day if you wait until then to submit and you start to have issues. So again, I would just really encourage you to not wait until the last day. Even plan for a couple of days prior, just in case you're having any issues submitting. And I think you'll be in a much better position. And then finally, GEPRA reporting. GEPRA reporting requires successful applicants to submit an annual performance report and a final performance report with the most current financial and performance measure data to demonstrate their progress in meeting approved project objectives during the reporting period. Under GEPRA, which is the Government Performance and Results Act, the following performance indicators have been established to evaluate the overall effectiveness of the TIF program. And so I'll just really quickly show you what those are. The first measure is the percentage of educators in all schools who earn performance-based compensation. The second is the percentage of educators in all high-need schools who earned performance-based compensation. The third is the gap between the retention rate of educators receiving performance-based compensation and the average retention rate of educators in each high-need school whose educators participate in the project. The fourth is the number of school districts participating in the TSL grant that use educator evaluation systems to inform the following human capital management decisions, and we talked about those before. So I won't go over them again. The number of high-need schools within districts participating in a TSL grant that use educator evaluation and support systems to inform the following human capital decisions: recruitment, hiring, placement, retention. Again, we've talked about those, so I won't go through them all. Measure 6 is the percentage of performance-based compensation paid to educators with state, local, or other non-TIF federal resources. Measure 7 is the percentage of teachers and principals who receive the highest effectiveness rating. And then Measure 8 is the percentage of teachers and principals in high-need schools who receive the highest effectiveness rating. Okay? And that was the last slide. So what we're going to do now, since we have a couple of minutes left, is we're going to review some of the more recent questions that have come in. A question from Emily Olson: will the rubric / scoring guidelines used to score the applications be public? And so I will say the answer to that is no. However, the selection criteria are public. Obviously, they're posted in the notice, and they're also in the application instructions. But the actual rubric and scoring guidelines will not be public. Let's move down to Megan. If an SEA intends to apply, is it the expectation that there be a statewide performance-based compensation system, or is it sufficient if the target LEAs named in the proposal have PBCS? And so, yeah, it's actually the latter of that. It's sufficient if the targeted LEAs have their own performance-based compensation systems. Okay, from Eva, when will the FAQs be posted on the website? So my goal is for them, please don't hold me to this, but my goal is to have them within about 2 weeks. So we have a pretty close to final draft of them now, and so we just need to get those vetted, and once they're vetted, we will get those published for you. All right, a question from Joe. The ESSA law relating to TSL states a description of the performance-based compensation system, or HCMS, that the eligible entity proposes to develop, implement, or expand through this grant. With that language, how can ED require that the PBCS be already established? And so the law describes broadly. We can't do less than the law, but we can certainly do more than the law. And in this case, we are requiring that the definition that has been established for this competition of human capital management system actually includes a performance-based compensation system. So when we say that a human capital management system has to be in place at the start of the grant, the performance-based compensation system does have to be a part of that. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the next question. Is it possible, one second, for a group of LEAs to participate as partners for a specific component of the project, for example, a shared teaching residency, while one CMO applies for the main proposal and enhances our HCMS and PBC systems? And so yes, that is, again, we don't prescribe exactly how that's met. Certainly, if there's a partnership of LEAs, they don't all have to be involved in every aspect of the project. They can be involved in sharing expertise and benefiting from the project in different ways. And so that would certainly be acceptable. Okay, from Amy, if the LEA fully funds their PBCS and wouldn't use any money from the grant to support the PBCS, can all of the dollars they spend on the PBCS annually be counted towards the 50% match? That's a really good question. I'm going to have to ponder that one for a little bit. Only because we don't have the guidance out and we're still getting some of that match clarity from our general counsel's office. I want to run that question by them. Would you mind terribly if you sent that question to the TSL at ed.gov inbox, and I will pass that question on to our general counsel, because I think that's actually a really, really great question. Will there be text available of the speaker for those hard of hearing? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if we'll have a transcript. I'm going to. That is another one that I will follow up on to see that if we have a transcript that can be provided. I'll find out an answer to that for you. And may applicants name vendors they wish to use in their management plan in their proposal with the expectation that they may work with them without having to document an RFP process. And so generally speaking, the answer to that is yes, that is allowable in the application process. They would have to still comply with all of the small purchase provisions, but yes, you can certainly identify contractors that you would like to work with as a part of the process. I've got a question from Erica. Can we submit an application for a program that provides compensation to effective educators solely in the form of non-financial incentives or rewards? I don't believe so. I don't know that we necessarily have addressed that, to be totally honest with you. And so if you don't mind, I would love to be able to run that one by our general counsel as well. I don't believe it's not. The intent of the grant is for there to be some form of financial incentive that's provided to teachers and leaders. I don't know that we can prohibit a grant application from being awarded that doesn't include any form of financial incentive, but let me just run that by our general counsel to see if I can get a good answer for you. If you don't mind sending that to tsl@ed.gov, that would be great. And will this material be posted for immediate printing? So like I mentioned, the slides and the recorded webinar will be posted. And then I've got one from Jeannie. The searches I'm doing for CFDA number 84374A are bringing up info for the TIF grant. Also, the TIF is regularly referred to in the slide presentation. Where do I find the application for TSL so that I may print it? And so we'll definitely fix. We even saw as we were going through there are a few references to TIF. It's just part of us transitioning from TIF to TSL, and we need to obviously make that transition 100%. The TIF, so the TSL actually uses the same CFDA number that TIF used, and so that's why if you're doing Google searches or what have you, you will find that it'll pull up. And because TSL is so new, it's not pulling up. It probably is just not pulling up for you under 84374A. So I imagine that'll change as TSL is around longer. Okay. And then finally, if you are a charter network, how do you meet or report on Measure 4 of GEPRA? And so let me go back to Measure 4. And so Measure 4 is the number of school districts participating in a TSL grant that use educator evaluation systems to inform the following human capital decisions. So a charter school district would be applying for this grant as a local education agency, and so that's we talked a little bit earlier about the type of documentation a charter school that's applying would need to have, and so part of that would be documentation that does show from your state's charter authorizing board that shows that the charter school is an actual local education agency. And as long as it has that classification, it would provide that data the same way that any other larger school district would. Okay. And that was the last question that we had in our queue here. So I thank you all for staying with us the whole time. We are just a few minutes past, about 8 minutes past. Again, I just want to really encourage any of you that may have any additional questions to just send them along to tsl@ed.gov, and we will be sure to respond in kind. So Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us, learning more about this grant program. I've enjoyed you all, and we'll be looking forward to being in touch over the next few months. Thank you. Have a great day.